Have you ever wondered where the problems in the world today would exist if we had deeper connection to ourselves, others, and the environment and acted from that place? Welcome to the Conscious Action Podcast with your host, Brian Berneman, who believes that connection is the key to taking conscious action as individuals and creating a better world. We are here to raise awareness and inspire meaningful action by sharing stories, knowledge, and conversations with thought leaders and change makers. From sustainability to well-being and everything related to conscious living, our mission is to empower you to be the change that you want to see in the world. Welcome, everyone, to a new episode of the Conscious Action Podcast. I am Brian Berneman, your host, and I have the pleasure to be joined all the way from Singapore by Malti Bhojwani. Thank you so much, Malti, for being here, for sharing this space with me. And for I will know that it's going to be a really nice conversation. For everybody that is listening and watching us, what can you share about you? Who is Malti?
Thank you, Brian, for having me on your show. Really exciting to meet you as well and hear about all that you've been doing. Who is Malti? The short version, I am 53, Singaporean, born in Singapore. I've lived in several countries like Australia, India, and Indonesia, but I've come back home to Singapore about 9 years ago. So that's the personal stuff. I have a daughter. She's grown up, 32, so I had her when I was very young. I am married, and I'm learning to play the piano right now, which is lots of fun. And professionally, I've been coaching and facilitating transformation for over 20 years. Started again in my early 30s and have been in the field for a while and still learning as I go along.
Beautiful. I love that. A lot of times I keep on saying when I ask this question, some people go directly to what they do for work. Some people talk about more about themselves and different parts of it. So, yes, thank you for sharing that. I would love to know, Malti, you say that you've been now in this space of work for the last 20 years. What prompted you to get into this space to support transformation and to support people?
Thank you. It started with experiencing my own challenges in life. As a young adult, I think all of us experience, when life doesn't turn out the way you think it's meant to. You try to follow some kind of linear progression. And for me, I felt my perspective was life was happening to me. And I was quite unhappy, overweight, divorced, penniless. I found myself in a predicament and wondering, what is this and why is my life so miserable? And I was lucky, I think, I can use the word lucky, but I think also internally inspired to look for answers. And I think the first answer I got was that I created this mess. And, once I realized that I created the mess, then came I can create something different. So I became a typical self-help junkie, read every book that I could get my hands on, went for many workshops, inspired by the likes of Tony Robbins and David Hawkins and Bruce Lipton, and just anything I could lay my hands on that would help me to shift my perspective from being a victim of life to learning to get into mastering my life. So that's how it started.
Yeah, I love that saying always, like how to shift from being a victim of our circumstances to the master of our lives. And I think that, with that, of course, the first step is always realizing, we are creating this, or there's an aspect of us that is creating this consciously or unconsciously. We have to take responsibility if we want to create a change. And, I remember last semester at the university that I was telling one of my students, it's like to be able to acknowledge where you are and to take responsibility. Because yes, some of us have had more privilege or more fortune in the circumstances that we grew up. And as well, by the time that we are teenagers, adults, we are co-creating a lot of that. So to be able to just see where you are and then being able to be curious to explore all of these different things, I think that is so cool. And not that many people surprisingly do this.
Yeah. You touched on two words that really kind of resonated. It's been in my consciousness lately, which is privilege and responsibility. And I think very simply that we are sitting here recording a podcast, that we can have, AirPods in our ears. We are privileged. We are privileged to information. It's almost unfair that it's us who are consciously searching and it's there for us. And yet those who probably could benefit from it more do not have access.
Mm,
And so with that came a sense of responsibility that I felt when I was younger as well, that if I can do this in my life, if I can transform my relationship with myself, my relationship with my body, my relationship with money, my relationship with others, then it's my responsibility to share it in whatever way I can. And even if through a sharing, and so I started to write books and coach. And my mindset was, look, even if I can't change the world, very lofty, big dream, but if I can make a slight difference, if someone hearing one word might touch them, even though they've heard it 50 times before, but just hearing it this time, maybe they're right today to hear this, then I'm living something bigger than just self-fulfillment. So I
mm,
think this privilege comes with this responsibility.
mm. Yeah, and I think that this is something going back to that class that I was talking about this with my students. I think that the one of the pitfalls that a lot of people that get the sense that they are privileged is that they take on the weight of the world, and it's a responsibility that is quite different than saying, I'm going to do something with this privilege and I'm going to be able to share my understandings and my personal experience. And if I can touch one person, great, because that one person, that's how we change the world. And I think that that's as well, like the I growing up as well, it's like I'm going to change the world, and then it's like, yes, I am changing the world by changing myself, by changing the people that I work with and the people that are around me. I'm changing the world, perhaps not in the same idea that I had when I was younger, uh, but I am.
Yeah. I love that you do this, and I love that you're awakening these younger minds. And also what you said earlier, it's if we can find that courage to look in the mirror, look at the state of our lives, and honestly, like take stock. What's going on in these different areas of my life? Only then, the first step for transformation is awareness. Because if we're not aware of how we are creating our lives, then there's really no access to making any shift.
Mm, yes.
Yeah, but
And
it's scary, I think, right?
yeah, well, we are creatures of habits, and what it's a lot of times easier to stay in the familiar than to go to something that we don't know. This is why a lot of people with unhelpful tendencies or in relationships or workplaces that are not the right ones for them, they stay there long or longer than what they perhaps think that they should, because they are more afraid of whatever can come next. And a lot of times, it's I usually say to people that one of my biggest aims or missions in this life is to be able to support people before they hit rock bottom, so that they can actually do that, have enough awareness, what you were saying, have enough awareness to create the change before everything falls apart. And for some people, that's the journey that they need to go through in life, but I think that some people, if they hear this type of conversations or what we are talking about or what we do for work, if they can hear it before they hit rock bottom, how much more helpful it's going to be and easier in a sense in their lives to create changes. But I would love to know, Malti, like for you, you mentioned your experience, like that you were going through a lot of different challenges when you discovered all of this. how did you started to shift? What were the things that you started to implement in your life that allowed your life to start to change as well?
It's um it's very it, it it's a little challenging to even answer that question because I think it's never one thing. It's always a series and a building. It's like you transcend, you include, you build on what you've already learned, and you start to practice. But if I were to bring it down to a couple of things that I think made the biggest difference, the first one was this whole idea of being responsible for my reaction to my triggers, to people around me and events around me. And I think this is age old. We can find quotes about this that are so powerful. My favorite one is Viktor Frankl's, from Man's Search for Meaning. Between a stimulus and a response, there is a space. So for me, that was the biggest eye opener. I read it in a book, and I went for a workshop and heard it again, and it stuck. It stuck so hard that I wanted to understand, what is this space? Stimulus, response, there's a space, because I never knew there was a space. Something would happen and I would react. And like you said, creatures of habit, I had a typical pattern in my reaction, which came from my victim mindset. First was blame. Let's blame somebody. Something happened. Whose fault is it? Someone did this to me, right? And then the next thing, after I exhausted the people I could blame, then I blamed myself. And then that's guilt. And so the cycle of blame and guilt, which later I started to learn, is the lowest frequency emotion any human being can have. Because you talked about rock bottom. I think rock bottom is when you're so consumed in blame and guilt, you can't lift yourself out of it. So for me, I was very curious about how to expand the space. And that's how I started to discover mindfulness practices, meditation, and different forms of it. How do I find breath work? So personally, what can I do to expand the space so that I can now choose a new way of responding to some old, preconditioned, ancestral programming that I thought was the way, the only way. So
Mm-hmm.
that was the shift.
Yeah, I love that. That as part of my personal journey as well, like working on that space has been huge because I remember this growing up, it was already like everything is going fast. I think that nowadays things are going a little bit faster than when when I grew up. Um, but I felt everything is going fast. I'm like going to school. I'm going to like to do all of these activities after school. I'm eating. I'm doing this, and it was quite a lot. And then once internet actually became a thing, then another layer added on top of that, and I realized later as I was practicing how I wasn't creating space in between things, and also how I could actually, in between things, even if there was no seemingly enough space, I could actually expand my awareness so that I could actually create that space. And I could find that space in between behaviors. I could find that space in between thoughts. I could find that space in between actions, and I think that's so important to be able to understand that there is actually a space in between things. And it just requires greater awareness to be able to notice that.
Yeah, I love what you say. And what I'm hearing is also that sometimes people think that space equals time, that I need a holiday. I need to go on a retreat for, 10 days to take that space. Yes, I agree that that space is important. And at the same time, we can create that space in an instant in ourselves by switching on that consciousness and that awareness.
Hmm.
So it
Yes.
doesn't have to equal time.
Yes, yeah, exactly. It can equal time, and also it doesn't equate to time. And I think that this
Yeah.
is one of the things that, for me, like having taken time for retreats and for experiences and to learn different methodologies and different perspectives allowed me to then create this type of space that it's not needed on time. It's just there in any single moment. I can expand that space. So it's a very interesting dynamic how they go hand in hand, actually.
Yeah, I love how you say it, and I also say it a lot. So I practice something called centering, which is simple. I call it a micro mindfulness practice or a micro meditation. Like I have a YouTube video which is like 2 minutes, and it's the most viewed because it's just my voice leading people in a centering. But at the same time, if we don't know what centered feels like, we haven't already had a dip in that pond of spaciousness, it's difficult to find it when we most need it in a moment. So the analogy I like to use is like, when you start to learn to drive, you learn you have to look at the gear and put it in neutral and then put it in drive. But once you know how to drive, your hands can do it automatically. Or similarly with the piano, like I shared, when you're learning, it's what am I doing? But once you learn, you can go there automatically.
Mm,
There's muscle memory or remembrance, or it's programmed. We know the space, it becomes familiar. And so I find that having the longer space and time mindfulness practices, breathing practices, meditation, going on retreats is so important, because that's when we sink into it, experience it, so that when we need it moment to moment, we can access it through micro cues.
mm, yes. And I think that this is one of the things that a lot of times I was able to bring into the spaces that I work with, workplaces at university, that perhaps there's not that much time, or they are not
Yeah,
always going to create that space. There's ways of engaging in practices that can support transformation that are not always, you need to go for 2 weeks on a retreat. There can be these micro moments or these practices within the workday, within the activities that we're doing, to become more present, to become more mindful, to become more aware. And through that, automatically we're going to change and transform, because as we become more aware, that's just going to happen.
yeah, totally agree. Yeah, so similarly, like I do a lot of workshops for teams. And again, corporate, they might be banks or insurers, and they're very busy, especially the most senior team. Everyone is busy, their calendars are full. We come together for 2 days and they want to get to outcomes. What can we walk out of here with? Whereas we encourage them to, take a breath, slow down, pause, let's go on the balcony a bit, get out of that dance, and just start to slow down. And then they realize that by slowing down, we realize by slowing down, we actually speed up, because we create that space to really listen and to get more creative, more focused. So totally agree with you. It's finding that space, finding that pause, and being compassionate that maybe many people don't have the luxury that I'm thinking you and I do, because it's the
Mm.
middle of a weekday and here we are chatting on a podcast. And many people don't. They're living very, very fast-paced corporate lives.
Yeah. Yeah. And like one of the things I know, I'm really fortunate and really privileged, and that I can set up my life in the way that works for me. Like I keep on telling people, it's like, yes, I'm working. This is part of, in a sense, my work. Also, uh, I'm not at the moment. This is not how I make a living. This is just me wanting to create something so that it can be beneficial, and connecting with people that, like have something valuable to share, and perhaps a different voice, a different word, a different perspective than me, that someone else might resonate with. And I think that, you know, as you're saying, I recognize my privilege and I recognize that I've been fortunate to set up my life in a way that I can do this. But I want to explore something multi that I think that it's important as we're talking for about, like some people that work in corporate, and sometimes they are looking for these outcomes and they are looking for this workshop or this work when people like us we go into businesses and it's like, okay, like what are we getting out of this? How have you been able to potentially bring this to taking responsibility for each person, their own life, and how their transformation actually transforms then the team and the culture and the business?
Hmm. So I do a lot of this organization-wide transformation, which sounds big, but I like to bring it down to one quote um, by Richard Barrett, which is organizations don't transform, people do. So if you're at the top of the organization and you intend to transform, you want to change the business results of this organization, you start to realize, or they start to realize that in order to change the results, then we need to change the way we work. What we do has to change. If we want to change what we do, behaviors and actions, then we need to change our mindset, which means we need to start looking at our own beliefs, our assumptions, our values, our limiting thoughts and beliefs, and even our inspiring thoughts and beliefs, and find that coherence and begin to behave in the transformed way. And only then will we be able to role model, behave in ways that will influence the team and hence their teams and hence the whole organization. So if I had, the liberty to design programs like that, it will always be the first module would always be lead self. So what do I need to take ownership in my own way of being?
Mm.
And then from there, how am I impacting the people around me? So how do I take ownership for the impact I have on the people around me, my team? And then from there, how can we really inspire and mobilize the whole organization to live in the way, the desired way? Because there's a promised land. Like if we live this way, we behave this way, we will get to where we want to get.
Mm.
But if we don't change anything, coming back to your first point, then it's quite ridiculous to have lofty dreams. And you can't expect one person at the top, the CEO, to do it all. I mean, it's not possible. So
Mm.
even that person needs a strong team. So I
Yeah.
think it always comes back to self-awareness.
Mm. Yeah, like for me, I love what you're sharing because for me it's always about that a business is the people. Like if the people don't change, then nothing will change.
Mm,
Of course, there's different stakeholders, there's different circumstances, like if perhaps a business isn't actually getting enough sales and suddenly something happens in the world and there's a need for what they are selling, even if they don't really transform themselves, they will get more sales. Majority of the circumstances don't change that drastically most times. Therefore, we do need to actually understand how are we engaging, how are we coming into the space, what do we believe, as you're saying, like those limiting beliefs, those tendencies that we have, how are we as a team actually working together, and what are we working towards? And I think that a lot of
yeah.
times, I remember with one of the businesses that I was working with, um, I did an exercise that basically it was about everybody sharing their motivation behind why they were actually at work. And I
Mm,
think that this was, like they were all kind of like at the beginning they didn't understand why I was doing that until they realized that once everybody shared, some people shared that, like since they were little kids, they loved doing that type of work. Some people shared that they were there because of the money. Some people shared that they were there because it was, like close to their home. Some people, different reasons why different people were there. And one of the things that came from that was that now the teams actually know, like, okay, this person is here just for the money. They are not going to go above and beyond anything because all that they are doing is, which is okay, like just going to work just for the money. Um, they are not going to go above and beyond. So as a team member, if I know that, then I'm not going to ask that person to do something after 5 p.m. if they are going home, because they are just going from 9 to 5 and then they are going home. Whereas someone else that perhaps is really involved and really into what they are doing, perhaps they can actually help. So therefore, then the dynamic of the team gets easier because now they know what, who they can ask for support, who they can ask for something more, and they start to know themselves more as people, which is another layer that in a lot of workplaces, people don't know enough about the people around them.
Exactly. They just know them as roles and functions and forget that there is a human being with a whole life, with their own needs and beliefs and motivations. And I feel as well like for leaders to realize that they're in the business of people and start to care, become curious about the motivations, the values of people, it's only through that that they will be able to influence and mobilize and motivate. So even this person, and no judgment, I think it's fine. Many people work for a living and maybe they have something else that makes their life more exciting. But even for them, they would be motivated to find ways to innovate what they do so that they can go home on time. So, just understanding that
Yeah.
can really transform an organization.
Yeah. I would love to get a few more, perhaps some lived experiences through your work or some insights that you gain on this intersection between organizational transformation and personal transformation.
Sure. Again, without sounding repetitive, it comes back to awareness and consciousness. It comes back to having the consciousness, the desire, and inner yearning to make a difference, where you're part of this organism made up of cells, so organization made up of people. You're part of this place because you can do something to inspire, make lives better. Either you're making lives better through your product. And I think people need to really have a strong belief that what we're selling or what we're doing is making a difference and is helping people out, making lives more pleasurable, enjoyable, easier, whatever, more meaningful. So knowing that you're doing something that's meaningful to you, I think that's at the core of it, and having that awareness that what got you to this point, what got us to this point, and I'm talking, say, leadership, what got us to this point isn't going to take us to the next level of transformation or wherever you want to go. Because we all probably got to a certain place doing something really well. But now, to what we were saying earlier, now you don't need to do that thing. What you just need to do is read people, inspire them, care for them, be empathetic, listen, collaborate, inspire collaboration, um, make sure that the structures, the processes support collaboration. So again, it comes back to finding that pause. So my most fulfilling client work has been the clients who have been open to the space, exploring their own inner work, realizing that I need to shift in order for me to make any changes in my life and my organization. So some of the beautiful ones are when people are willing to explore some of the modalities like breath work, mindfulness, meditation, or even be willing to give up 2 or 3 days and go on a wilderness retreat or go on a retreat to deepen their self-awareness. And then find ways to build practices in their lives around, I'm not going to just blow off or tell off someone who makes a mistake. I'm not going to just react from my old patterns, but I'm going to find that space in the moment, take that breath, and choose the response that will be helpful, conducive, empowering, that will be on the other side of how we say we want to behave.
Mm.
So for me, that is the key.
Mm. Yeah. I love that because a lot of times for me, I work with what I call conscious leadership. Sometimes it's hard to understand what that is, but in part is what we are talking about. And in part as well, it's about understanding the difference between managing people and being a leader, and how to be a leader to the people in your team, not to, like as a blank statement of like, this is what leadership is. Not like you're leading people in your team. Do you know them? Do you know how they actually get the reactions, how they have their tendencies, their patterns of behavior? Do they actually need someone to in a sense slightly push them a little bit, or are they people that actually require more space, or need to actually share how they are feeling? The more that we're able to understand ourselves, and then through that understanding our teams, we can change so much. And one of the things that I've seen a lot with a lot of my clients is that some people, like they have been just promoted. They were really good at what they did, and then suddenly they are in a position of leadership, but
Yeah.
they actually don't have that's not what they like used to do. Perhaps they were great programmers, or perhaps they were great at whatever role they had, and suddenly it's like, okay, we promote you, now you're leading this department or this team. And there's not only sometimes a lack of skills of what to do as well, there's a lack of, like, or um, a belief that it's like, who am I to do this? It's like, who am I to do this? Well, I'm not, like, I'm not a leader. And that's, in a sense, that doubt that comes there. And, some people then put up a show into, like how they think that a leader or manager should be, but they feel like an imposter a lot of times.
Yeah. I love how you shared that. People get promoted because they're good at what they're doing. And there is no real kind of training. I know a lot of us are trying to do this, right? Leadership development and, let's give people these capabilities and the mindset of leading. But there's two things that I love around what you said. One is that they are real human beings who have names and families and needs and motivations and styles. And so you're not leading some just random team. You're leading people who by right you should get to know and see each person as a unique soul that happens to be in your world. And the other thing that I liked is there's a sense of worthiness. A lot of people think that, I think it's a paradox. So people feel like they have to earn their worth on this planet. Who am I to be this leader? Marianne Williamson, her beautiful poem, right? Who am I to be great? But then who are we not? And I find sometimes life gives us gifts or feedback. So obviously, we've been doing something really well. And the world, our surroundings, has acknowledged that and rewarded us with a role. Let's just call it leader for now, or podcast host, or author, right? We get these opportunities and they're gifts, but realizing that we are worthy of this gift. We were born worthy of the gift. To me, I find leadership is a lot of that, not only leadership for, you know, using corporate speak, but self-mastery, self-leadership is stepping into our own self-worth,
Mm.
realizing that I was born worthy. I no longer need to prove, to do, to achieve anything to be worthy. And from worthiness, then there's no longer the need to compensate, to facade, to pretend. But I realize I can just be me.
Mm.
And me being worthy, stepping into that will exude trust. People will start to rely on me more because they see that I rely on me. And I've actually had the privilege, very humbling privilege of coaching executives just on this, stepping into their own worthiness. Some of them get there through faith. And I'm agnostic of, how we get there. But just remembering that you are worthy, you were born worthy. From the moment you were conceived, you were worthy. And it's such a paradox and so ironic that we're born and then we run around trying to earn our sustenance and our worthiness, whereas it was our birthright. So with my story, this leader stepped into her worthiness. And before, within weeks, the universe responded and she was promoted. And it was an awesome role where she gets to really be an inspiring woman leader in a great organization in a fabulous industry. So that was very touching to see that.
Beautiful. I think that it's really interesting how a lot of times it's really nice to get the validation or to get the feedback that we are worthy. And sometimes I think that, as you're saying, one of the challenges is that if we are not getting the feedback that we want or the validation that we want, we might believe that we are not worthy. And as you're saying, I hold the same belief. I hold the belief that we're all worthy of everything the moment that we are born. There's nothing that we have to do to earn that. Yet, because of the way that our society functions and how much a lot of people care about others, and to validate their own experience, they need the validation from others, then it's really interesting how, we can actually get to that place through outside circumstances that show us, oh, there's a promotion, so now I'm worthy. And perhaps for some people is, I'm worthy, and now the world is showing you there's a promotion.
Yeah, that's so interesting, the loop. And often, again, with human beings, we have a negative bias. So even if we get validation, acknowledging our worthiness, we tend to look at where we're not getting it. So instead of, soaking in and reveling in what we do receive, we start looking at, oh, but, this person didn't give me wonderful feedback, or that person didn't like my Instagram post, and I think, even with vanity in these days, like, I follow on TikTok and on Instagram, I find it quite sad that a lot of us want validation through even our physical appearance and our possessions. And it turns into an endless loop because we can buy, everything that's available on the market and still not feel worthy. Or we can choose to realize that we're unique. Not all of us are going to ever, no matter what we did, we're not going to be able to change our DNA and become, taller, or I don't know, have a different face or get a promotion. Maybe that's just not what we're doing. But if we can start to acknowledge, what do I value? My values are different. That's why my life has turned out different. I have prioritized things that are different from what maybe the world is validating right now. And that might change.
Yeah, definitely. I think that it's a worthy thing to keep on reminding people that they are worthy, that we are all worthy, and to keep that going, because at some moments where life presents obstacles or challenges, there might be a tendency to revert back to the thought that we are not. And I think that just remembering and just having that going, it's so important over there. And Malte, I would love to know, Nick, in your experience as well, what have been some of the challenges working in the space that you do, in terms of getting the people to, in a sense, buy into what you're sharing?
The biggest challenges usually are at the start, and talking about time. So an organization, a potential client wants to change something, but they want to change it now. And they want 6,500 employees in their organizations to change it now. And then when I offer or design, say, a 1-year journey, they're like, no, we don't have a year. And then when we break it down to, okay, we'll do it in 6 months and let's have the leadership come together for 3 full days. or let's do 3 modules for the leadership, spend 5 days working on self-awareness and self-regulation and everything that we've been talking about so far, instilling the practices that will help each leader to take ownership for their own lives and their reactions. So often the pushback is, we don't have that much time. Can't you just do this in 2 days? Or can't you do this in 4 hours? So for me, that's the first challenge. What's worked so far for me is when, starting to build some credibility in the space. And when clients start saying to each other that, please give it the 2 days, give it the 3 days, invest the time, it will have exponential ROI that is difficult to quantify at the start. For me, that's the first thing. The second challenge is very personal, and I'm still working on this one. It's, for me, mindfulness and this trust in the good of the world. Agnostic of religion again, but I have a very strong belief system that the universe conspires in my favor, that life is unfair, but it's tipped in my favor. And those are some belief systems that have helped me to transform and to create the life that I'm living now, that I'm so grateful for and I'm so happy with. So calling them beliefs, I feel, is more helpful, because I feel we all have beliefs. So transformation is to be able to look at, inspect the beliefs that are running us right now and check if they're supporting us or not. And if they're beliefs anyway, they're not truths, right? We can't run it to any kind of data testing to see if it's an actual truth. Truth is a big word. Usually it's an assumption. I mean, an assumption that we have built into the way we operate. It's the way things are. But if it's an assumption and it's a belief, it can be replaced. So for me, that's the core. But to do that, I feel that we, as I've heard from you as well, we've spent years, really deepening this personal practice, spirituality, mindfulness, meditation, breath work, all of it, silence, retreats. We've spent so much time and energy and invested our lives in it. And now to be able to share this with others as a quick fix, do this and all your problems will be solved. That's the challenge. Mm-hmm. So I try to take on this perspective that if I can plant the seed, that this is where you're going to find your answers. It's not going to happen today, but if you can just a little nudge, and then you find your own way, and people do, whether they find it back in their faith or they find it in learning a particular mindfulness practice or breathwork practitioner or yoga or whatever, they find it themselves. Mm. And then that will help to really make the transformation sustainable. So I think the last thing I'd say here is, the difference between change and transformation. We can change employees in our team. We can change the way we do things and processes. But this deep internal shift is a transformation from within that cannot be reversed. It's irreversible, like the metamorphosis of the butterfly. And coming back to the worthiness, it's the caterpillar was always the butterfly, but she didn't know.
Mm. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I love all of that, because I see some of the challenges that you were mentioning. I've had this as well. I actually one recent podcast episode that I did was about the quick fix mentality in terms of our well-being, and how it's like it is possible that things like that we work with someone, and in one half an hour or 1 hour they got something and suddenly they are transformed. And a lot of people, they might need time, just like as you're saying, like I've been doing this for over 20 years. Like, it's been a long time to get to some of the realizations and insights and perspectives that I gain. And some people, then it's like, okay, give me the bite size. And I'm like, it doesn't always work like that. It can, because if someone is ready and they just needed to hear something, or they just needed to practice something, and then suddenly things change, wonderful. Most people it's a process, it's a journey, and when we allow for that to happen, I think that the ramifications of that or the transformation that can take place is huge. Because I love what you're saying about that shift. There is a place that I remember when I was younger, that one time my teacher said, there's certain experiences that there's no going back from them. That now once you saw something or experienced something, you can't unlearn that. That's always going to be there. And now you're a different person because that is the new information there that you can't ignore anymore. So the more that we're able to create those spaces of shifts and transformation, that can, that can lead us to places unknown. And, talking about some of the things that you've been sharing, it can lead us to places that we can't even imagine. Like life can
Yeah,
be so much greater than what our imagination actually can think of.
beyond imagination. You remind me of one of my teachers. Her name is Geeta Bellin. She's in her 80s, lives in Australia, and she uses the word root perspective. So when she taught us to be facilitators of transformation, the essence was to shift the root perspective, because once that is shifted, you cannot unsee it. There is no going back. The butterfly never returns to being a caterpillar. And it's that root perspective. I find as well that in the work that we do, I love what you said at the start, where you're not making a living from doing what you do. And the living, or what the abundance that flows into my life, is a byproduct of me doing what I love doing. And I realize that I need to be very humble. The humility is so important, and the willingness to see people in their highest potential is so important. And it's not easy to do. It's easy for me to say these words to you right here. And even for me, it's always a constant reminder. How can I be humble, find my humility? How can I see people in a higher regard than I'm seeing them? Instead of judging them, hold them in higher regard. Instead of taking credit, hold myself in humility. And to your point, when the fruit is ripe, anyone can come along and touch it. It's going to fall. And if I happen to be that lucky person that day that, someone read a line from my book and their fruit fell, it's not because I did it. It's because they did so much work
Yeah.
that just took this one touch, one nudge, and they experienced their transformation. So yeah,
Yeah.
staying humble. Yeah.
I love that. I had many years ago someone that I worked with, and they were telling people, and they were so thankful, and I was like, "You did it!" Like, yes, now I can see that I was there, I supported that, but she did it. She did her transformation. I was just there, as you're saying. It just happened that I was there for that part of that, but it was all her. It's just whenever I change, I change. And yes, I can honor the books that I read and the people that wrote them and all of the teachers that I had. I've done my transformation. You've done your transformation, and we can honor and we can take a lot of wisdom and knowledge from a lot of different people. At the end of the day, each of us are the ones that create that transformation. So I love that you mentioned that, and I love to be able to understand the changes and how that root perspective. I'm going to take that word because I haven't heard it in that way, and it is what I was referring to. So thank you for for sharing that. And Malti, I'm aware of our time. I want to honor our time. I want to ask you one last question, which it might be something that you have already answered, perhaps. What is the one thing that you wish everybody knew?
Already answered. We'll say it again, because I myself, although I feel there was a moment, when, like we talked about, when the penny dropped or the fruit was ripe, was when I stepped into my worthiness. To do this work, we cannot do it if we weren't humble. I get that. But we couldn't do it if we didn't feel worthy ourselves. So stepping into worthiness, owning that we are the right person for this circumstance, wherever we find ourselves, to trust that I deserve to be here. I'm worthy to be here. I can make a difference to the people around me, the people who I have the privilege of touching the lives of. And finding that internal balance between I am worthy, but also staying humble. So I don't think that's easy to do. I think like riding a bicycle, it's always going to tip. When we feel unworthy, we lose that confidence. Then we become too humble, maybe. We discredit ourselves. We are doing a disservice to ourselves. When we overdo that, we become arrogant. And so another distinction is, to be elegant in our worthiness and not arrogant, to own it, step into it, and know that we were born worthy. So that's my mantra. I'm worthy, and so is everyone around us, worthy of having a beautiful, loving, fulfilling, abundant life experience.
Beautiful. Thank you for that reminder. I love that, being elegant in that as well. That's a beautiful way of putting it. And Malti, if people want to connect with you more, where can they do that?
I will come from humility and worthiness to say that my latest book, which is called Mastering Your Life, I've been receiving a lot of feedback lately where people have felt that it has helped the fruit to fall from the tree. So look me up on Audible, on Amazon, Mastering Your Life. I'm everywhere on Instagram and LinkedIn and Facebook. MaltiBhojwani.com, Malti Bhojwani YouTube as well. So thank you so much for having me on your show. What a pleasure to talk with you today, Brian, and to connect with you on these topics that, it's not so often that we get to talk about worthiness.
Yes, thank you, Malti, for taking the time. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for doing the work that you're doing. The more people that are doing this work on themselves and then are able to share it, the more that we're going to create more ripple effect and change the world as we want to. So we are doing it. It's just that. So thank you so much, Malti, for being here. For everyone listening, what did you hear? What resonated with you? Was there something new and interesting? How are you already creating change in your life and transformation? Just leave a comment, whatever it is that you're finding this, to keep the conversation going. And thank you, everyone. And thank you, Malti, once more for being here. And we'll see you all next time.
Thank you, Brian.
Bye.
Bye.
What did you like the most about this episode? Take a moment to think about what change you can make in your life today.
Share your conscious action on social media using #ConsciousAction and tagging @ConsciousActionNZ so we can celebrate your impact on the world and create a ripple effect.
One easy action we would love for you to take right now is to share, like, and subscribe to this podcast. This will help us get these messages out into the world and inspire more people to take conscious action in their own lives, contributing to the better world we hope for.